Hello everyone, welcome to another design programming lecture. This one is going to be on Cybernetic Serendipity, the 1968 exhibition, curated by Yasha Reinhardt, incorporating many of the cyberneticists that we began to talk about in the previous two lectures. It is the culmination of many of the kinds of outworkings of the processes and ideas that we discussed in the last video. So if you haven't watched that last video, please go back and watch that one and the associated videos with it as well. This video and its associated videos are obviously on the Canvas module, so make sure you go and check that out. But before we commence watching some of these amazing examples of early computer-based artworks, I'm just going to read a short excerpt from the exhibition guide itself, Cybernetic Serendipity, which was reprinted recently. I was fortunate enough to get a copy. The excerpt is from Norbert Werner himself, one of the leading cyberneticists, and it's on the use of machines and control. So here it is. In giving the definition of cybernetics in the original book, I classed communication and control together. Why did I do this? When I communicate with another person, I impart a message to him. And when he communicates back with me, he returns a related message, which contains information primarily accessible to him and not to me. When I control the actions of another person, I communicate a message to him. And although this message is in part imperative in the mood, the technique of communication does not differ from the message of fact. Furthermore, if my control is to be effective, I must make cognizance of any messages from him which may indicate that the order is understood and that it has been obeyed. In this thesis of this book is that society can only be understood through the study of messages and the communication of faculties which belong to it. Now, apart from the gendered language, obviously being written in 1964, is commonplace, but what we see here is a discussion about that is fundamental to interaction design, to user experience design. It's the seed of the kinds of ways of thinking about human-computer interaction that we're familiar with today and that we're learning about in this degree. Specifically, we're focused on how messages are communicated and ways in which we can understand whether those messages have been received. And it's that fundamental communication, that back and forth between the machine and the person, that we want to explore in the subject through art. So let's together explore some of these videos. Now, each of these videos feature Yasha Reinhardt, who is the curator of this exhibition. And the first one that we're going to watch here is actually her speaking about the exhibition at its inception. It was a late night lineup video. It was called, a show obviously that was on TV at the time in the 60s, talking about the exhibition itself, and lots of examples of the artworks are here, and we'll begin to explore them in a little bit more depth as we go through, and I'll just pause and go to discuss things.
When one goes to an art exhibition or an exhibition which involves poetry and music, we think that the people who have composed the music, or who have produced the images, or who have written the poetry are artists or poets or composers. In this exhibition, this is not true.
Yeah, Kim, calm down. Down.
I love this one. So drawing machine, not dissimilar to how we use P5. And Lejeul's curves.
In the first section, we have works which are produced with a cybernetic device, with a computer. That is, computer-composed and played music, computer-generated graphics, and computer texts and poems. What Adrian Mark of Vienna did in this particular work was to take letters which consist of circles, semicircles, and straight lines. And this is why you get letters like P and L and O. And what he did was to try and find what words would make sense using these components. I'm sitting at the moment in one of the 4 domes where there are music tapes lasting 12 minutes. The music is on a loop and it's changed daily. And anybody sitting here can hear one or another type of computer music throughout the exhibition. This is an entire computer music studio which belongs to Peter Zinoviev. When Peter Zinoviev first said that his computer is a composer, I couldn't believe it. Given a sound source, the computer can be left to produce its own sequences.
This is in the 60s. They're talking about automated musical systems as something that we're obviously still, very interested in today. Machine learning models for music generation are a big thing at the moment, and this is the 60s. We're talking about the same exact ideas.
The Computer Technique group from Japan have taken one photograph of the late President Kennedy, and they have made 6 transformations. The computer has scanned the photograph and has turned the image into a linear image with lines pointing either towards the ear or towards the eye. The drawing machine.
Just before we get to the drawing machine, that example of an iterative system, where they've developed a form of control where it will point to different areas of the image itself, different areas of the photo, that's obviously a generative drawing system. And while that one is not a drawing machine itself, this one is.
By John Revillius is a harmonograph. It enables people who can't draw to make pretty pictures. Anybody who has a visual idea but has no talent for drawing can use the computer and express himself in numbers or in ideas and get a visual result.
I love the idea that this drawing machine was to replace people who didn't have drawing talent, but in the modern day and age we now know that digital drawing itself is its own craft and its own skill, one that's an augmentation or an enhancement of existing drawing capacities.
And get a visual result. This is a cybernetic sculpture by Wening Tsai.
This one's just weird. I don't know what it does.
This sculpture is calmed by red light and it's activated by blue light.
I love what she says there. It's calmed by blue light and activated by red light. It's a personification, like we were talking about in the previous lecture. We have this anthropomorphic or anthropocentric kind of way of looking at the design of cybernetic systems, where we impart a human attribute onto them to try and describe their behavior, or understand and analyze their behavior. Where computationally, it's just responding to frequencies of light. We associate a humanistic behavior with those kinds of actions. This is my favorite by far.
In the second section, we have cybernetic devices as works of art.
Oh, go away. Da. Yeah, don't be shy. Come on.
So what you're hearing there is, it's a bit confusing when you see it. It's not generating those human voices, actually responding to them. So that was an example of a listening device. It would respond to and move towards the loudest sound. And remembering this is a 60, so that's a pneumatically controlled or hydraulically controlled robotic arm. It's kind of a crazy thing to think about back then. But yeah, so it would, if you were standing near it and you made sound, it would orient itself towards you. It would kind of look at the loudest sound. And we'll hear Yasha talk about that in the next video a little bit.
This machine, which consists of 3 rows of different colored bulbs, responds to sound. It's by Richard Hogle and it comes from America.
It just could be a Dead Mouse song.
Namjoon Paik has 11 television sets, which he has transformed, so that one cannot see any of the programs that are going out, and yet they provide the source for some of the images which one can see. Some of these can be manipulated by the audience with magnets.
I will not.
This is by far the creepiest, I'll tell you that much.
Behind the building, you are bad, bad, bad.
What is that? That thing is crazy. This is nuts as well. It's like a Rube Goldberg machine. Brain. All right, that's the end of that one. Before we get on to the next one, so that was a video of original footage of a lot of the different actual things that were exhibited in Cybernetic Serendipity, the exhibition in 1968, which are all documented in this in the actual catalog itself. Now, the person we saw in that video is Yasha Reinhardt in 1968. This is her now, or at least I think in the 2000s, or just a bit after that. I'm trying to remember what year this one was recorded. But this is Yasha now. She's talking in retrospect about the exhibition and talking a little bit about what it was like. Now, it's something to note that she gets really emotional about it as well. I think it's obviously it was something that was such a significant moment in her life, and I think it's a good moment to note that this is again in the history of computational art forms and in the history of computation. We again have a woman leader taking charge and actually pushing boundaries and trying to explore what's at the cutting edge of possibilities, and like Ada Lovelace and many others in the early days of computational art, but also computational design, it was women who were actually leading the charge.
So the title of the exhibition is Cybernetic Serendipity. Serendipity because since cybernetics and computers in this exhibition involve random systems, the exhibition is about happy chance discoveries.
Happy chance discoveries, exactly like what we're exploring in this class. Building systems that have embedded in them emergent behavior. So happy accidents, serendipity, emergence, these are all terms which are synonymous and descriptive of the kinds of systems we're trying to develop in this class.
With the computer. Now, of course, artists didn't have computers in the 1960s, as you can imagine. So most of the participants in the exhibition were scientists. And there was a magazine which was published in the early 60s in Massachusetts called Computers and Automation. And they had competition for the best computer graphic. Well, so one didn't need to look much further than that. And that's how I found many of the participants in the exhibition. So computer graphics was part of the exhibition. There were also robots. Most of these were made by artists like Nam June Paik, Bruce Lacey, and then there were also films composed with computers and music. There was enormous interest. As it says here, where in London could you take a hippie, a computer programmer, a 10-year-old schoolboy, and guarantee that each would be perfectly happy for an hour without you having to lift a finger to entertain them? From today, there is just one such place, the Institute of Contemporary Arts. I want you to imagine 1968. It's difficult to imagine today. The reason why all these photographs are in black and white, none of us had cameras. Color film was something quite rare. If you also look at these invitations and look at the text, we didn't even have an electric typewriter. These texts were typed on a manual typewriter with a carbon ribbon, which gave it, the text, a very fine definition. This is an interesting piece of work. This was a flower-type shape, and if you addressed it quietly, if you talked to it, hello, hello, it would respond. It would respond by turning round towards you. And children were very, very good at it. But the adults were embarrassed about talking to a machine, so they didn't get any response.
I think about that. Embarrassed to talk to a machine, you think about speaking to, voice-activated agents in public. Like, this is the 60s, the adults are embarrassed to talk to this machine. We still have the same kind of interaction paradigm in the modern. Talking to Siri out loud can sometimes be considered socially inappropriate or awkward. I just love that that's an embedded socio-technical behavior which was culturally experienced all the way back to the 60s. Talking to non-human agents has in it some kind of tension, some kind of, awkwardness.
When I was 4, I was given a robot, and my mother told me about a machine that would be available one day where you put in dirty clothes and the clothes come out clean and ironed. And I thought, I'm going to have such a machine. And I've always been interested in machines and robots. I would like to know what's next. I've been trying to think today, if we wanted a departure from here and now, what would we have to do to have the same feeling that we had? People got very excited seeing that exhibition. It was a revelation. But what would be a revelation today? And I'm still thinking.
Absolutely love that challenge that Yashi gives us. What is that next step? How do we bring that level of just ambition and excitement around the possibilities of technologies, and expose them using art and design. I think that is an amazing challenge, and it's kind of at the precipice, at the coalface of what young interaction designers and user experience designers need to be thinking. Yasha's clearly from a generation that was thinking along cybernetic lines. They were thinking ideologically about the shape and nature of society and how technology would augment or enhance or extend human ability. And I think so often we've normalized the way and homogenized the way that we actually approach the design of technologies into really clear pathways. And a lot of that is to do with, internet culture and the way that the internet has developed over the past several decades. But I think looking back at these, thought leaders from the 60s, and hearing them still speak in a modern context about the challenges that they faced then, and still wanting to push further, wanting to see how we can move beyond even where we are now. I think that's that kind of the hunger they have for the innovation that technology provides humanity. I think it's a really exciting provocation that should be ringing in our ears when we go out there to design new things.